And here it is. So maybe you're sitting in your pew today. We don't have pews, we have these chairs. Maybe you're sitting at your table and you're like, dude, maybe I'm gonna speak someday. Maybe you are. Just stay in school and don't do drugs. and someday you could be up here. But I am actually really humbled and unprepared. But what I'm really excited about, even as we were worshiping and stuff, is that Jesus is here, guys. And my biggest prayer is that when I'm up here talking, I would just get out of the way enough that you could see him. You know, he's like right there. See, right there. And then if you see him, then you fall in love with him. And if you fall in love with him, then everything else makes sense. Because you can have things like make sense up here. And if you don't love Jesus, then like who even cares? And so this whole week, it doesn't matter what you take away from this other than just to love Jesus more. And that's something that I can't even make happen in you. So I'm praying for you. You can pray for yourself. God, I don't love you. Help me. And he loves those prayers when we're honest with him. I want to talk really quick because I know it's like pretty much midnight. What time is it right now?
11:30.
Yeah. It's like way past. I will, if we get to midnight, I will turn into a pumpkin. So I don't want that to happen in front of everyone. So we'll go through this quick. But first of all, can I get a show of hands for anyone who has a notebook or it can take some type of notes of any kind? Okay, 2 people. 2 people. No, at all this week. Maybe you don't have it with you right now. Right now doesn't matter. But you can take notes this week, right? Okay, good. Because, and here we're going to talk, basically, you're not going to learn anything at all this couple of days. It's possible that you might learn a little bit, but there's two different ways of thinking about how people learn. Okay, there's like the old Greek model is when they actually had to do something before they could learn it. So if you're like a fisherman or something and you wanted to become a great fisherman, then you would go to your grandpa's house and he would take you fishing, and then you would watch him, and then he would hand the rod to you, and then you would do it. And that is like, you can't learn something until you do it. And so we're here, and hopefully you'll get to learn a little bit about Jesus, and you will get to do it, right? Because we're going to have some quiet time, and you'll get with Jesus. But the biggest thing that's going to happen is when you go home, then does this change your life at all? And so that's why I would love if everybody has at least something that they can write down. And what I want you to do across this week, it doesn't even have to be from the stuff that I share. It can just be something that God's speaking to you across the week, is I want you to make a little to-do list. Okay? And you're just going to put, 3 boxes max. Not a lot. This is just your takeaway of like what I want. You're going to do the little thing that's like your to-do list and your to-be list. Okay? Because there's things that you do and then there's things that you be. And so you got to do both of those. But by the end of the week, if somebody has their to-do list and it doesn't have anything on it, then you fail, you don't get the certificate, and you have to come back next year. But at the same level, like you don't get to go up. If you were thinking about speaking, just forget about it. Okay. So these are the 2 ways that people think. Some people think that you hear the instruction, that you understand it, and then that you obey. Maybe. If you want to, right? We hear what our parents tell us, we get it, and then if we like it, then we'll do it. And that's the way that we approach God a lot of times. And this is the way that, I don't know, I think I've done this with the Bible too. I've come to it, and like if I understand it, and Timothy Keller talks about this, he says basically if you come to the Bible, if you don't have any disagreement with the Bible, if there's nothing in the Bible that makes you like kind of like, ew, I don't know about that part, or that you don't understand, and you're just going along with it, then it doesn't have any authority over you. An authority figure is somebody who comes to you and says, you know what, you got to do this. And you're like, I don't want to, I don't understand, but I'll do it, because you're my dad, you're bigger than me. But if you just come to the Bible and you're like, pick and choose, and you're kind of like, if I understand that, then I'll obey it, then that's not what we're talking about with authority. And so what it actually is that we hear something, we obey it, and then we understand it. Maybe. Just maybe you'll understand it. You might not understand it. You might hear it and then obey it and then not get it at all. But you're not going to get it until you put it into practice. And I'm not trying to say this as like a hard thing of like, oh my gosh, you disobedient children, why don't you just get into shape? It's more just trying to say that like if you want the joy of learning something, then you're going to have to do it. And this is the way that the Greeks did for hundreds of years or thousands of years or maybe hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know. The Greeks were a long time ago. So that's how they taught. Is this, they had their pupils and they would just, somebody was your master and you would follow them and you would do what they did. And you wouldn't just it wasn't just like the chalkboard. It was like, okay, all of my young Greek servant boys, we're going off to the market. And then they would watch and they would learn, they would understand all from that. So all of that is to say that the stuff that you write down, the stuff that you get, if it's all in here and if something is changing in your head, then it's not going to make any difference until it works out into action. And that might happen here, but it might also happen at home. So I don't want you to because I've done this before, guys. I've gone to camp and retreat and stuff so many times where I'm like God will speak something, and then you'll just kind of be like, you'll be like, oh, I get it. I have a moment of clarity. Everything makes sense to me. And then you go home and you completely forget about it. It's like, what good did that do? I mean, you had the whole world figured out. And then you just totally forgot about it. So at the very least, while you're here, you're trying to somehow write a note to yourself in the future. You're like, dear future me, 2 months after retreat, who has forgotten everything about God and Jesus. I've gone back to worshiping Satan, listening to Miley Ray Cyrus, all the terrible things. Listen to me. This was important. I understood everything. And then sign it, me, from 2 weeks ago, so that you know who it is, because you trust people who you respect, and you probably have respect yourself a lot, hopefully. If you have self-respect issues, and we'll talk afterwards. So you're making a to-do list, because, okay, here's a quote, Bonhoeffer, which we'll talk about, actually not at all the rest of the week. Here's one quote by Bonhoeffer. He says, only the believing obey, and only the obedient believe. Bonhoeffer is the king of whatever that just was. He would always be like, all red is green, and all green is also red. That's like everything Bonhoeffer ever writes. You can just put it through that syntax. It's fun. Sometimes you can anticipate what is going to be on the next page, because he'll say something, and then you just be like, flip that, reverse it. That's what he's going to say. Because Bonhoeffer, he's fun. But do you understand what he's saying? Only the believing obey. Only if you believe or trust even in what somebody is saying. For example, I wake up, I get out of bed, and somebody comes and knocks on my door, and it's my grandfather. And he opens the door and he says, grandson, we're going fishing. No, he doesn't even say we're going fishing. He says, get in the truck. And I'm just like, I know him. I have this trust, and so I'm going to do it. And that is obedience. My obedience comes because I believe. I trust. I know this person. I know this individual. And only the obedient believe. Which means only as I start to step out and walk and see that thing am I ever going to be, if I just wake up and I'm like, no, Grandpa, no, and then I never go with him, then as time goes on, I'm going to start to doubt if he even was going to take me fishing, or what was he going to do? Was he just going to kidnap me? Or, I don't know what was going to happen there. And if I don't believe in him in the first place, I'm not going to get in the truck, right? If one of you guys comes and knocks on my door and is like, get in the truck, I'm like, you can't drive. What are you talking about? I'm not going to go with you. So there's a level of trust. And when we talk about obedience to God, there has to first be a relationship with him. You have to know him. You have to know who he is. You have to know his character and everything. So does anybody have a Bible that they want to get to really quick? Can you open up to Matthew 21? And we're not going to go there, but I'm going to read a verse really quick that's out of 1 Samuel 15:22. I'm going to sum it up, where he says, to obey is better than sacrifice. When in the Old Testament, they had all these sacrificial systems and everything. And there's another spot where he says, isn't this the fast that I have chosen, that you guys would seek justice and take care of the poor? And the people of Israel always thought that it was about offering these sacrifices or doing this stuff. And he's like, obedience. That's what gets my attention. Are you in Matthew 21? Is somebody in Matthew 21?
Yes.
Can some read 28 to 32? And if we were in Nicaragua, then you would say, amen, to let everyone else know that you had got there and you were starting to read, so that they don't awkwardly start in over the top of you, especially if it's in a different version, and then we're really messed up. From where to where? 28 to 32. Are you going to amen it, Kyle? Are you going to amen it?
Amen.
Oh, amen.
But what do you think? A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, Son, go walk today in my vineyard. He answered and said, I will not. But afterward he regretted it and went. Then he came to the second and said likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir. But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? They said to him, the first. Jesus said to them, Surely I say to you, the tax collectors and harlots into the kingdom of God before you. And John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. The tax collectors and harlots believed him. And when you saw it, you did not afterward relent and believe him.
Amen. Somebody tell me what's going on in those verses. Sum it up for me. What's happening there? Yes, William.
So Jesus is rebuking the Pharisees
Mm-hmm.
because they're being disrespectful and making fun of people who aren't as good as they are.
Yeah.
But he's saying oh yeah, and they want to look like they're doing everything to look good, but actually those tax collectors are actually things as well.
Yes. Exactly what he said. That there was these people. The reason he told the story about the 2 sons in the context is that there was the Pharisees, and they were the ones who had learned the religious rules, the laws, and they had kept, they had followed them. But then there's these other people that were not. They were living a sinful life. They were doing all this stuff, and they repented and they turned to Jesus. And he's like, look at these 2 sons. And the first one comes out and is kind of like, yeah, I'm going to go do that, and then doesn't do that. And how many of you have ever done that? Okay, that's me all the time. And it's like, sure, I'll do that. Because it's easier to save face when somebody comes and asks you like, hey, Nathan, I just need you to do this one thing. Would you bring, did I bring my sleeping mat? The one thing that I'm supposed to do, right? And then it's easier to say in the moment, that it's just like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. And then you can just put it off till later, And people ask you to do something, and your word is very important. When somebody comes to you and is like, can I trust you? And you're just like, yes, you can trust me. Look deeply into my eyes. And they're like, I'm looking deeply into your past. And the past like 15 times that you're going to do it, and you didn't. And like, I don't care about your eyes right now. And we say that we're going to do something, and later we don't. And the point that he's trying to make in that parable is that what is more important to him, to God? It's not even that you have this moment, this encounter where everything, because, I look at this guy who says that, yes, I'll do it. And I see myself so many times being at like a retreat or something. I've got my hands in the air and I'm just like, Jesus, I just love you. I just want to do whatever you want me to do. Actually, this happened here, I remember one time at retreat and I was out here, just on my knees, and I'm like looking out across the lake, and I'm like, God, if there's anything that I ever know to be your will, then I'll do it. And there's big snot bubbles. You know when it's the snot bubble? That's how I was with the Lord. And then what does that even matter, right? When you feel it, and you're like, oh man, this is what it means to surrender. This is what it means to give my life to God. I'm wholly yours. And then you come in, you sing the song, you're like, forever reign in me, reign in us. And then you go home, and the first thing is like you have to give up your time or sacrifice for somebody. And God's like, all right. He's like Matthew McConaughey, and he's like, now we get to do it, right? We get to act it out, and then we're scared. And we're just like, that's kind of ugly and gross, and I didn't want to do that. And it's hard, especially, and this is what's going to happen if you guys do go home and you're just like, all right, let's do it. Hopefully, like when we're talking and everything, you're just like, I can't wait to go home because I want to go love my family and I want to go be Jesus to everyone. But when you do want to go home, it's going to be hard because you know what happens to somebody who's been bedridden for like a whole bunch of time is they get up and they step out of bed and their legs are wobbly and it's hard, and maybe they fall over and they hit themselves on the ground. And that happens when you first start with the Lord, and you're just like, okay, I want to do this thing now. And I shared with some of you guys at youth group about my testimony and my story of how like I started reading the Bible, and it sucked. It was so hard to read the Bible. It was so boring. But I was starting with God, right? And that's what is going to happen with all of y'all. And I'm not saying that you're not saved and that you don't already know Jesus. I'm not saying that it's like, whatever. But every single one of you that's here can go to another level with Jesus. And one of the things that I will ask you right now, before anything else, is that I really feel I've been praying about this retreat for a while now. Before I even knew that I was speaking at it. Because when did I contact you guys? Like September or something? And I'm just like, hey, can I come to retreat? Can I speak to retreat? And I don't think I heard back for a really long time. But I was like, you know what though? I'm going. And I'm gonna prepare some things just in case. So this stuff has been brewing like an herbal tea for a very long time. And like it's for you guys. But one of the things that I will ask you, and one of the things that I've been praying about this week, is that I think one of the thing that the enemy, we do have an enemy that wants to distract you guys with other stuff, that doesn't want any of this to sink in. And one of the ways that he will attack, because this is how he attacked me in the past, is you will find something that I say across the course of this week, something that I say indefinitely. Not only will you perceive it to be like heretical or theologically inaccurate, but it probably will be. You'll be spot on. And the problem is that we can like get attached to that to the point where there's other things that God would have wanted to like sink into the heart. And so I'm just asking you in advance to forgive me of anything that I say that will like, there's a guy that was he was like a professor at this school, and he said 80% of the things that I'm about to tell you are true, and 20% is heresy, and I just don't know what is the difference. And so you guys have to figure it out. I don't know which is which. And that's what's going to happen across the next couple of days. I would ask you to forgive me ahead of time, and if you notice that happening in your mind where you're just like, oh my gosh, but predestination is not a thing. And you're just sitting there and you're just pondering on it, and here I am talking about like Jesus loves you. He loves you a lot. And you're just like, I'm going to ask him about that afterwards. We're going to talk about it. I just know, let's go talk about it. And it's like, we can talk about those things. Write it down. We'll have a little question, and you probably all know more than I do about them. And so you can teach me on it afterwards, instruct me. I am open to instruction and correction. But if you notice that happening this week, it is normal, because we have an enemy, and he doesn't want this stuff to sink in. Remember, there's like the different kinds of soils, and it talks about the seed that was thrown on these different soils, and like one of them, like it grew up and it got choked out. One of them was on soil that it didn't even grow up. Another, there's thorns, and there is one of them that is just like ready for the seed to fall, and it says that it grows up and it creates like 100-fold crop, And so that is what we're praying for, is that it's just like, yay, you get to, and that doesn't mean that you go out and like get a whole bunch of people saved afterwards. We're talking about like through the Spirit, in your own life, like that you would start to look like Jesus. And so that is the goal. That is what we're praying for. That's all I wanted to say right now, is basically just have, like, if you do have something to write notes down and everything, to write that down. You have your to-do list, so at the end of the week, when you go back home, and if you want to write a letter to yourself, that's cool too. Does anyone have any questions? And if not, good? Okay, cool. Let me pray for us all. Can I pray for food too, or is that still in the works?
It's ready to happen.
Oh man. Thank you, dear baby Jesus, for this food. Okay, let's pray. Dear God, I just thank you so much for this time. I thank you that we can be here. I thank you for the food. I thank you for each person that's here, God, and I know that you're doing something with each one of them. And I just pray, Jesus, that you would open our hearts just to hear what you want to say through the speaking time, through worship, through conversations that we have with each other. God, you are just, we acknowledge that you're here, and we don't want to lose sight of your presence, that it would not just be certain times of day that we focus on you, but that you would go with us throughout all of it, and that we could start that practice in our life so that when we go home, we could just be with you. all of the time, God. I thank you for your presence, God. And I thank you again for this food and ask you to bless it in the name of Jesus. Amen.